This episode of The Apex and the Abyss contains graphic descriptions, audio, and language that may be unsettling to some individuals. Listener discretion is advised. If you have never felt a pang of loneliness or the dreaded feeling of abandonment, count yourself as a lucky individual. It's not easy to feel like there is no one out there who understands you. It is arguably even worse to think that you have finally found your place only to lose it when people decide to leave you. This could be a romantic relationship, familial, or a platonic one. They all hurt when they don't end as you intended. But that's life, isn't it? A constant undulating roller coaster of emotions that we do not have control over, despite what we tell ourselves when the days turn into nights and we are alone with our thoughts. I believe it is safe to say that we have all laid awake at night, unable to sleep, thinking about what we could have done, what we could have said to make someone stick around a little bit longer. Within time and as we grow, the sting of loss and abandonment dulls. Typically, a person moves on to some extent, learns from the experience, and will inevitably try again to open themselves up to another person. That's the way it should go. People who want to be in your life will make the effort to do so. You should never have to feel like you are forcing someone to be around you when they don't want to be. Personally, I have had all types of relationships that have felt like this. I have felt like a placeholder for someone when they were just waiting for someone else to come into their life because I didn't fit the typical mold of their relationships. But these specific individuals didn't have anyone else to latch onto at the time. And I naively thought that if I was a person who went above and beyond in any relationship, that one day I would be enough. It isn't a good feeling, but after certain events transpired in my own life, I have mustered up the courage to cut such toxicity out of my day-to-day. Despite the pain and sadness, I was better for it. Now I have learned that not every person feels this way, or even knows that they have the strength within themselves to walk away from a bad situation. It is not easy, to say the least. The fear of losing someone can prevent us from being our best self sometimes. But for one man, being alone was his greatest fear, and he desired total control over a person. Being alone for him was not an option. You're listening to The Apex and the Abyss, and this is the story of Jeffrey Dahmer.
The suspect may well have been involved in at least 17 homicides. 17 homicides which our investigation indicates, some of which may have occurred outside the city of Milwaukee.
Authorities here are wondering how anyone could have committed these gruesome acts, just as others here in Milwaukee are wondering how police couldn't have known, especially since Dahmer was a convicted sex offender out on parole.
The end of this horror story takes place in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, at the Oxford apartment building, 924 North 25th Street, apartment 213. Those who lived in this building didn't have much to complain about. However, those who resided near apartment 213 could smell something odd. The occupants couldn't place their finger on what that rancid smell was, but the man who lived in 213 told them that his freezer had broken, and what they were smelling was rotting food. Or, another excuse that was given was that a fish had recently died in his aquarium. His neighbors accepted these explanations and hoped the odor that was emitting from 213 would leave the area sooner rather than later. On July 22, 1991, those who lived at the Oxford Apartments had no idea that behind the door of 213 was a room filled with death. No one ever suspected that the mild-mannered man who lived there, Jeffrey Dahmer, was capable of what was found inside.
We have also, in addition, through our investigation, determined that the suspect may well have been involved in at least 17 homicides. 17 homicides which our investigation indicates, some of which may have occurred outside the city of Milwaukee.
Before we discuss what was found in apartment 213, we need to go back to the beginning. On May 21, 1960, Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He was the eldest son of Lionel and Joyce Dahmer, who were just shy of their first wedding anniversary when the young boy was born. Jeffrey's parents were hard-working individuals. His father was a chemist who was pursuing a Ph.D., and his mother worked as a teletype machine instructor. The Dahmer home was a cold environment, to say the least. Jeffrey's parents often fought and they neglected their young son. It is said that Joyce caused strain amongst her relationship with her family due to constant arguments and hostile behavior she would exhibit. Joyce suffered from anxiety and depression. She appeared to have other struggles with mental illness as well. Some would claim that she took dozens of pills, a mixture of antidepressants and hormones while pregnant with Jeffrey, pills that could affect the child growing in her womb, though many years later, Joyce would refute such a claim. Over time and after Jeffrey had been born, Joyce's behavior would spiral down, and she would even attempt suicide by overdosing on pills. The attempt would be unsuccessful, and Joyce's anxiety and depression would remain. During all of this, Lionel was working most of the time or studying for school. The life of a chemist was a busy one, and he was not home often. When he was, all of his attention had to be on Joyce, or else she would have outbursts. Even when he did his best to appease her, it did not appear to be enough, and the two would fight constantly in front of their young son. In a few instances, items would be thrown at one another, and a kitchen knife would even be pulled out as a threat during one bad fight. Lionel would state that he was responsible for everything in regards to the household, such as cleaning, food shopping, and things of that nature. He would claim that Joyce rarely put forth an effort to contribute to the day-to-day tasks. However, even though his home life was far from perfect, Jeffrey maintained a joyful and vibrant disposition. He was, on the outside, a normal child. However, he did have a few oddities that you don't see too often in young children. By the time he was 4 years old, he had developed a fascination with bones of deceased animals. It all started one day when his father Lionel had found and disposed of animal remains that he located underneath the house. Jeffrey witnessed this, and after that he would constantly look around outside for more bones. A massive shift in personality would come when the young boy was reportedly 6 years old. Jeffrey would undergo surgery for a double hernia. After the procedure, the once exuberant child was now reserved, shy, and awkward. Some experts would later claim that this surgery deeply affected Jeffrey's mental state and would subconsciously propel his later obsession with dissection. Teachers would notice that something had changed within Jeffrey as well. His first-grade teacher would even write a note to the effect that she believes that the young boy was neglected at home due to the illnesses that his mother suffered from, and because of his father's absence. She would also state that Jeffrey would keep to himself on the playground at school, seemingly avoiding other children. Lionel would speak to Jeffrey's teacher in regards to his reclusive behavior, but he did not appear concerned. Lionel was a shy boy who kept to himself as well. He thought that maybe Jeffrey was just like him. A little while after Jeffrey recovered from surgery, Lionel and Joyce welcomed their second son, David, into the world. To help Jeffrey get used to the fact that he was now an older brother, the Dahmers let their eldest son choose the baby's name. By the time David was born, the family had moved from Wisconsin to Doylestown, Ohio. Lionel was in the process of finishing up his degree, and soon after the first move, Lionel was able to obtain a job that caused the family to have to relocate again. This time to Akron, Ohio. The house located on 4480 Bath Road was beautiful and surrounded by trees. It was private and peaceful. One night while sitting down to a chicken dinner with his family, 8-year-old Jeffrey was looking at the bones that the meat was clinging to. He asked his father what would happen to the bones if he were to place them in bleach. Now, to most people this might seem like an odd question, but to Lionel he looked at it as his son being scientifically curious about chemicals and their reactions with other objects. Jeffrey, at this point, had become withdrawn from everyone around him. so his father happily engaged his curiosity. Lionel would show Jeffrey how to properly preserve animal bones with bleach. Lionel Dahmer would have no idea that this fascination would lead to far more sinister acts by the hands of his eldest son. There are some reports that state around this time when Jeffrey was about 8 years old that he was sexually abused by a neighborhood boy in Ohio. This incident cannot be confirmed. There is no police record at all, nor did Jeffrey ever state that this happened. In fact, he would deny it when his father would later come forward with this claim. However, if this just so happened to be true and Jeffrey just didn't want to admit that it occurred, it could explain some of his behavior when he was younger and as he grew into his teenage years. By the time Jeffrey was in high school, he was drinking alcohol daily. He would hide bottles in his locker and drink throughout the day. Many of his classmates looked at him as the odd man out. He rarely interacted with anyone and had few friends during this time.
He did not have normal friendships. That was not who he was. There was nothing about him that was normal. So we were the only friends he really had, which is sad too. So, he just didn't have close relationships.
Jeffrey Dahmer was a loner, but at some point in his time in high school, he would become the class clown. He was so starved for attention that he would fake seizures, flail on the ground, make loud grunting noises, and knock things over at school or in stores just to get the small group of friends he did have to laugh. These outbursts would be referred to as doing a Dahmer. Jeffrey would also pull a prank on his school's picture day. He would sneak into club photos that he was not a part of. A stunt that would make a teacher irate to the point where she would black out his face with a marker. Despite being goofy in front of his classmates, Jeffrey still felt a deep loneliness within. It would be discovered many years later by his high school classmates that Jeffrey was gay. He would take a young woman to his senior prom, but the fact of the matter was that Jeffrey was attracted to men. Something that he knew he could not reveal to his family, in fear of being shamed. His father, Lionel, would openly admit later down the line that if he knew of Jeffrey's orientation, he would have done something to try and, quote-unquote, fix it. Now, when it comes to such a preference, there is nothing to fix. To put forth that idea in someone's head to make them feel ashamed of who they are and who they are attracted to is psychologically damaging. Despite the fact that his parents seemed to be ignorant to this aspect of Jeffrey's life, one could assume that throughout his time with them, he had heard some derogatory statements regarding people in same-sex relationships. Regardless, Jeffrey would briefly date a young man while in high school, but nothing significant came from this relationship. After that fizzled out, Jeffrey would begin to have fantasies about being the dominating partner in a relationship to a submissive counterpart. While the dom-sub fantasy is not an uncommon one, Jeffrey's would go to a much darker place. Going back to his childhood fascination with bones, Jeffrey was also intrigued by dissection. So much so that at a young age, Jeffrey would gather roadkill, dismember the bodies, and then store the separated parts in jars. He would turn the family's woodshed outside of their home into a sort of laboratory for his experimentation. In one incident, Jeffrey found the body of a dead dog. He would decapitate the animal and nail its body to a tree. Then he would place the skull on a spike in the woods that surrounded their home in Ohio.
One of the biggest things that I've been wondering is just how on earth, how it got established with entrails, with insides of dogs or foxes as you made your way around the neighborhood.
I think it started out as just childhood curiosity,
just to see what it looked like inside,
right? And something went wrong.
Was there some pleasure in the cutting open of the animal?
Yes, there was. No sexual pleasure, but just it's hard to describe.
Sense of power, sense of control?
I suppose that's a good way of putting it, yeah.
In 1978, Jeffrey would graduate from high school. What should be a happy time for any young person, it wasn't for him. His home life was in shambles and he was heavily drinking alcohol. Lionel and Joyce were in the process of divorcing and Jeffrey's father would move into a hotel. Lionel was also dating another woman at the time named Sherry, who he would eventually marry. Joyce too would leave the Dahmer home. She was seeking treatment for her depression and took her son David with her while she received help, leaving the now 18-year-old Jeffrey in a vacant family home. Soon after these events took place, Jeffrey Dahmer would commit his first murder. While driving around, Jeffrey would pick up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks. Hicks, who caught Jeffrey's eye while walking around shirtless, was on his way to a concert when he was approached by Jeffrey. Dahmer was able to convince Hicks to come back to his home for a few drinks. The pair would spend the next few hours smoking marijuana, drinking beer, and listening to some music. Some reports would state that they had what Jeff called light sex, which to him meant kissing, hugging, and masturbating one another. Whether that truly occurred is up for debate. Any details that we know about Jeffrey's crimes comes from his recollection specifically. Other reports would claim that Jeff knew Stephen wasn't gay and that the pair just hung out for a while. Either way, after some time, Stephen Hicks was ready to leave the Dahmer home, and he attempted to do so. Jeffrey became angry and just wanted Stephen to stay. So, to do that, Jeff would take a 10-pound barbell and hit Stephen over the head with it, rendering him unconscious. He then proceeded to use the barbell to strangle Stephen as he lay on the floor. Once Hicks was dead, Jeffrey would strip Stephen naked and masturbate over his body. After that, Jeff would place Stephen in the crawl space under his house. The next day, Jeffrey would go out and buy a large hunting knife. He would use the knife to dismember Stephen's body. Jeffrey would later state the first cut he made was on Stephen's stomach, and seeing what that looked like inside excited him, just like it had when he was younger and he would dissect animals. He would then place the body into garbage bags. After another day or two had passed, Dahmer would place these bags into the back seat of his car and he attempted to drive to the local landfill to dispose of the body. It was the early hours of the morning, around 3 a.m., when Jeffrey was erratically driving down the road. An officer spotted him driving left of center and pulled him over. While being questioned by police about what he was doing, the officer would shine a light in the back seat of his vehicle. This officer would see the bags and inquired as to what Jeff was up to. Jeffrey would tell the officer that his mother was having a difficult time at home and he was trying to get rid of the garbage for her. The officer would inevitably believe the story and let Jeffrey go. This would be the first lucky break he would get over the course of the next 13 years. Not being able to dispose of Stephen's body the way he had initially intended, Jeffrey would place the bags back into the crawl space. Jeffrey would then take Stephen's head and place it on the floor of his room and masturbate in front of it. After more time had passed, Jeffrey would eventually place the remains in a drainage pipe behind his house. The remains would stay there for a few weeks before Jeffrey would return to them. He would separate the bones from the remaining flesh, and then he would take a sledgehammer and shatter his skeleton. He would then take the pieces and scatter them in the wooded area behind his home. He would then burn any remaining items of Stephen's, such as clothes and the contents of his wallet. He also threw the knife he had purchased and Stephen's necklace into a nearby river. A few weeks later, Jeffrey's father would return to the house on Bath Road, accompanied by his girlfriend Sherry. Allegedly, Lionel was unaware that Jeffrey had been living at the house by himself. Jeffrey's father, forever trying to push his son to stay on a normal path in life, helped the young man enroll at Ohio State University. Lionel would then move back into the home on Bath Road. Jeff's stint at university only lasted 1 semester. He was unable to keep his alcohol consumption under control, and with that he failed most of his classes. Jeffrey would drop out before the 2nd semester even begun, despite the fact that his father had already paid for it. By January of 1979, Jeffrey would enlist in the United States Army at the request of his father and stepmother. They believed that this would help him grow up, in a sense, give him structure and discipline that he lacked. After he completed his training, Jeffrey would be stationed in Germany as a combat medic. In 1981, Dahmer, who had picked up drinking again after a brief stint with sobriety, he was found to be unfit to continue his military service. He was honorably discharged from the Army by March of that year. Jeffrey believed that he didn't kill during his time in the military because he had no opportunity to. However, later reports would state that allegedly Jeffrey would rape his bunkmate during his tour of duty, along with another soldier. The claim of sexual assaults during his military career is widely debated amongst true crime aficionados. After being discharged, the military provided Jeffrey with a plane ticket to take him anywhere he wanted to go. Dahmer, not wanting to be lectured by his father, decided to go to Miami Beach, Florida. Jeffrey would stay there for a few months, living out of a hotel and spending all the money he made from working at a local deli on alcohol. Eventually, he would be forced to sleep a few nights on the beach because he was kicked out of the hotel he was staying at for not being able to afford a room anymore. After this, Jeffrey called his father and asked if he would help him so he could come home to Ohio. Lionel agreed to help him, and Jeff made his way back to his home on Bath Road. Jeffrey would stay with his father and stepmother, but the arrangement was not working out. Dahmer was still unable to control his drinking to the point where he would be arrested on a drunken disorderly charge within 14 days of his return to Ohio. After a few months, Lionel and Sherry kicked Jeffrey out of their home, and he would have to go stay with his grandmother back in Wisconsin. Jeffrey got along with his grandmother very well, and the hope was that her influence could help him get back on the straight and narrow. Going back to Wisconsin seemed to really help Jeffrey. After a few weeks of being there, he was able to find a job, he was going to church, and he was respectful of his grandmother's house rules. Despite things seemingly going well on the surface, darkness was still stirring within Jeffrey Dahmer. On August 7, 1982, while in Wisconsin State Fair Park, Dahmer is said to have exposed himself to a group of women and children. This occurrence resulted in Jeffrey being put on probation and having to pay a small fee with the court. A few years would go by with no incidents, but early 1985, Jeff had a job at the Milwaukee Ambrosia Chocolate Factory as a mixer. He worked overnight at the factory and would typically go out on his only night off to the local gay bars, clubs, and bathhouses. Around this time, the darkness that was buried deep within Jeffrey would awaken. Up until this point, the murder of Stephen Hicks was the only homicide he had committed. However, one day while sitting at the local public library, Jeff was propositioned by another man to meet him in the men's room to fool around. The interaction never occurred, but this approach caused Jeff to think back to his teenage fantasies. Desire to completely dominate over a person and to have complete control over someone for his own sexual pleasure. After this, Jeff's frequency at local bars and bathhouses increased. Sex with partners was not something Jeff enjoyed. He would become quite embittered during the acts when whoever he was with would move or try to take the lead. Dahmer would later state that he began looking at people as simply objects of pleasure. To quote, he said, "It's a process. It doesn't just happen overnight. When you depersonalize another person and view them as just an object for pleasure and not a living, breathing human being. It seems to make it easier to do the things you shouldn't do." By the summer of 1986, Jeff had participated in a sleep study due to the fact that he had trouble falling asleep. Most likely due to the fact that he worked such odd hours. He would be prescribed strong sleeping pills that, quite frankly, didn't gradually put you to sleep. They basically knocked you out. After realizing how powerful the sedatives were, he decided to use them on people. You will hear audio throughout this episode from detectives reading direct quotes from Jeffrey Dahmer during his later confession. What you're about to hear is Jeffrey speaking about his preference when it came to sexual interactions. The description is slightly graphic.
He reported that at the baths the notion was, quote, sex, anything goes, end quote. He reported that he used condoms some of the time. He stated that he liked being the active person in sex, that he only allowed anal penetration once or twice because it hurt him. He reported...
We are not using the name of the drug.
I will not.
Okay.
All right. He reported that he started using, and I'll just say a drug that had sedating effects.
Sleeping pills.
All right. He started using sleeping pills during this period because some guys wanted to perform anal sex and he did not want to. This was a way of keeping them. Specifically, he did not want to be the recipient of anal sex, and consequently, if he were to drug the person, they would then fall asleep and he would not have to participate in anal sex where he was the receptive partner. That is where the person would put their penis in him. He reported that he would go to the baths on weekends and have approximately 3 or 4 partners. He was trying to control his compulsion, so he went to a store when it was about to close. He hid out in the store, and then he stole a mannequin from the store and brought it to his house. He kept this mannequin for 2 weeks. He would stand over the mannequin and masturbate. His grandmother saw the mannequin and asked him where he got it. He then took the mannequin out and disposed of it. At age 26, he reported that he was heavily into the bath clubs. He reported that at this time he was working the night shift at the chocolate factory, would go to the bars on weekends, usually around 2 a.m. He reported that once he got to the bathhouse, he would find a person and then lay next to the person and masturbate and engage in what he called, quote, light sex, end quote. He reported that most of the men he met there did not want just the light sex, but wanted what he called, quote, heavy sex, end quote. He stated that once the person was asleep, he did not feel quite so rushed or pressured with the person. He reported that he would fix a drink in which he would put approximately 5 sleeping pills, and this would keep the person asleep for approximately 8 hours. He stated he would stay with the person, staying awake for about 3/4 of the time, and then he would sleep with the person. Usually, he would masturbate 3 times during that period. He reported that he never injured anyone and never recalled attempting to strangle any of these men that he stayed with at the bathhouse. He stated that once he was in the room, he would have some conversation with the person, mix them a drink, and kiss them. The person would then get groggy, and the person would then fall asleep. He indicated that he would only experience an erection about 10% of the time when the person was in an awakened state. He reported that once the person fell asleep, he had complete control and could do what he wanted at his leisure. He did not have to entertain the person, and he felt that he could leave the room if he wanted to. He indicated that he had drugged 10 or 15 people before the management learned what he was doing. Subsequently, his membership was revoked. He then started using a local hotel room, and he stated that at this point, the bathhouse had been a much more controlled environment.
Now, he's telling you that when they're in an awakened state, he can only do something 10% of the time.
He could only get an erection 10% of the time.
Did you ask him about the other times when they were asleep?
Yeah, when they were asleep, he was able to get erections, and I think it's somewhere here in my notes, it was either 90 or 100% of the time.
As stated previously, Jeffrey would frequent a bathhouse in Wisconsin. This bathhouse in particular required a membership to get in. While here, Jeffrey would begin to drug individuals and then sexually assault them. After over a dozen reported incidences, Dahmer would be kicked out of the bathhouse. Shockingly, in all the research done for this episode, not one report was filed against Jeffrey during this time. Even though he could no longer go to the bathhouse, this did not stop Jeffrey from drugging people to render them unconscious. He would simply lure people to hotel rooms and slip them sleeping pills into a drink. It wouldn't be long before Jeffrey began thinking about the idea of stealing a corpse to use for his own sexual gratification. While living with his grandmother, he would steal a mannequin and use it to hold at night and to masturbate with. But his grandmother discovered the mannequin, and Jeffrey would eventually get rid of it. The idea of having a lifeless object was something Jeffrey had been toying with for a long time. It is said that Dahmer only attempted grave robbery once, but he failed at digging up the dirt, so he quickly abandoned this idea. Jeffrey would find himself in trouble with the law again in August of 1986. He would be arrested for masturbating in front of 2 young boys by the Kinnickinnick River. Somehow, Dahmer was able to get the charge reduced from indecent exposure to disorderly conduct. It is alleged that he had told officers that he had been urinating in the river. Again, for this offense, he would only receive probation. By this point, it had been 9 years since Dahmer had murdered Stephen Hicks. You would think that perhaps after nearly a decade of not killing, that the Hicks murder was just a one-off. Clearly not an accident, but maybe killing wasn't something Jeffrey ever intended to do, especially in a serial sense. This would all change in 1987. While at a bar, Jeffrey would meet a man named Stephen Toomey. The Michigan native was last seen alive on September 15, 1987. He was leaving a restaurant in which he worked at, and it is said that Toomey would cross paths with Dahmer at Club 219. The pair would hit it off, and Dahmer would invite Stephen back to a room he had at the Ambassador Hotel. What Stephen Toomey did not realize is that when he entered room 507, he would not exit it alive. What Dahmer can recollect of that night is that the pair drank heavily. The next thing he remembers is waking up to Stephen's lifeless body next to him. According to Dahmer, Stephen was hanging halfway off the bed, and Jeffrey could visibly see that his chest had been beaten in, and that blood was coming out of Stephen's mouth. Jeffrey also noticed that his own forearms were bruised. He would state that he had no memory of killing Stephen, but that he clearly was responsible for his death.
I had put some sleeping pills in his drink to render him unconscious, and was just going to spend the night with him. When I woke up in the morning, my forearms were bruised, and his chest was bruised, and blood was coming out of his mouth. He was hanging over the side of the bed, and I have no memory of beating him to death, but I must have. And that's when it all started again.
And once it started again, you found it impossible to stop.
Right, that's when the obsession went into full swing.
Realizing he needed to get the body out of the hotel room without being seen, Jeffrey would leave the room after placing Stephen's body in the closet. He would go out and purchase a large suitcase. Jeffrey would admit to being frightened and alarmed at what he had done. He didn't understand what happened in the middle of the night, when he apparently blacked out. When Jeffrey returned to the hotel, he would book it for an additional night, and he would place Stephen's body into the suitcase. Jeffrey would wait until around 1 a.m. to leave the hotel. Dahmer would return to his grandmother's home in West Allis, Wisconsin, with Stephen Toomey's body. It would be around a week later that Jeff would dismember the remains in his grandmother's basement and then dispose of the body. Well, all but one piece of Stephen. Jeffrey would hang on to Stephen's severed head. He would keep this for about 2 weeks. He attempted to preserve the skull as a keepsake, but was unable to. He would inevitably shatter the bones with a sledgehammer and dispose of them, just like he did with the rest of Stephen Toomey's body. After this murder, Jeffrey would spiral out of control. The notion that people were just objects was in full force, and he was constantly on the hunt for a new victim. He decided that he was not going to fight his urges, but embrace them. A few months would go by before Dahmer set his eyes on James Doxtotter. James was only 14 years old when he was approached by Jeffrey. According to reports, James would hang out in front of gay bars and clubs in Milwaukee. On the night of January 16, 1988, Dahmer would ask James to come home with him for $50. It is reported that Dahmer would ask if he could take nude photos of the boy, to which James agreed to. When they got to his grandmother's home, it is said that the pair would fool around for some time, and then Jeffrey would drug and strangle James. Allegedly, Jeffrey would commit his first act of necrophilia on James's body. What transpired next is almost an exact play-by-play of what occurred with Stephen Toomey. Jeffrey would put James in his grandmother's basement, then, after about a week would go by, he would dismember the body, dispose of the remains apart from the head, and attempt to keep the skull. This venture would lead to another failure, and Jeffrey would eventually dispose of James's skull as well. In March of 1988, Jeffrey would meet Richard Guerrero. The 22-year-old would be propositioned to take nude photos at Dahmer's home, to which he agreed to partake in. Jeffrey would drug Richard and then strangle him. After Richard was dead, Jeffrey would engage in necrophilia, and then the following day, Dahmer dismembered his body, and kept his skull for a few months. A few months later, Jeff's grandmother would begin to get fed up with the antics of her grandson. She had observed that he would bring men to her home late into the night, and this is something that she did not agree with. She also noticed a terrible smell coming from the basement and her garage, a smell that she knew Jeff had something to do with. In one particular instance, Jeffrey would bring back a minor to his grandmother's house. Luckily, Jeff's grandmother saw the young boy, and Jeffrey decided not to kill him.
My name is Ronald Douglas Flowers, Jr.
Approximately what time did you get to the Club 219 that evening?
Not real sure. I know it was late because the parking lot was pretty filled at the time, so I imagine it was 11:30 around that time.
Okay. And did you meet your friends there?
Yes, I did.
After the bar closed, what next occurred?
They all left, and I went back to my car and tried to start it.
And when you tried to start your car, what happened?
Well, I had been having a problem with my choke, so I imagine that was what the problem was, and it wouldn't start. And after I kept trying it and kept trying it, the battery just died.
Pardon me. What did you do next?
Well, then I went to the phone booth, which is located on the corner of 2nd Street and Pittsburgh, I believe it is.
Did you come in contact with the person you now know as Jeff Dahmer?
Yes, I did. He offered to give me a ride to go with him to get his car, to bring it back, to jump start my car. He had the cab drop us off a little ways away from the house because he didn't want to he lived with his grandmother, and he didn't want to wake her up.
What happened when you arrived there?
I said, I'll just wait for you here. He was going in to get his keys, I believe. And I said, I'll just wait for you here. And he said, no, why don't you just come on in? It'll just be a minute. And he offered me a drink. The next thing I recall happening was thinking to myself, why is he looking at me like that? Because for the first time, his eye contact was solid. He didn't divert it at all. And it was almost as though he was waiting for something. I'm thinking to myself, what is he waiting for? So naturally, I started to drink the coffee quicker because I became uneasy to get out of there. And the next thing I remember was becoming extremely dizzy and my head starting to go down, and that's it.
When you say and that's it, do you mean you passed out?
Yes.
What's your next memory?
Woke up in County General Hospital in Milwaukee.
Were you missing any property?
Yeah, I was missing. I was missing all the cash from my wallet, and I was missing a bracelet that was on my right arm, and a herringbone chain that was around my neck.
If you know, did the hospital remove your clothing at any time?
No, they did not. I don't think they had a reason to.
When you next undressed, did you notice anything wrong with your clothing?
Yes.
What was that?
I noticed that my underwear were on inside out.
After this, Jeffrey Dahmer would move into a one-bedroom apartment. Jeffrey would not be in that apartment for a full 24 hours before getting arrested and charged with second-degree sexual assault of a 13-year-old boy. Dahmer had asked the young boy to come back to his apartment and he would give him $50 to take his photo. The boy agreed, and when he got there, Dahmer would offer him a drink. This drink would be laced with sleeping pills, and soon the boy began to feel the effects of the medication starting to take hold of him.
Did he say anything to you?
Yes, he told me he asked other kids if they would just pose for, quick $50.
If they would pose for a quick $50?
Yes.
And what did you say to him more, or what did he say to you then?
I asked him if it is his career or he said it's a hobby.
He said it's a hobby?
Yes.
What did you say then, or what did he say then?
He asked me if I want to pose for him just for a quick $50.
What then happened?
Then we start walking to his apartment.
After it had been pulled, your shirt had been pulled up to your neck area, was a photograph taken?
Yes, he offered me some drink.
Did he say anything to you about what you should do, if anything, with your zipper?
Yeah, he said that I should put it all the way down and then, show my underwear.
And you put it halfway down, and then what did he do?
He put it all the way down.
And what else did he do?
And then he grabbed my penis.
He went under your underwear and grabbed your penis?
Yes, he did.
And then after he kissed your stomach, you said, I got to get out of here. Something like that. What did you do then?
I just grabbed my book bag and then I opened the door. And
you moved to the door of the apartment?
Yes.
Was the door of the apartment closed at that time?
Yes, it was.
And had it been closed after you entered the apartment?
Yes.
And what did Mr. Dahmer do when you went to the door with your book bag?
He said, wait, don't forget your money. And don't tell no one that I'm doing this.
Jeffrey would be convicted in January of 1989, but he would not be sentenced in this case until May of 1989. In the interim, he would commit another murder. Jeffrey would return to his grandmother's house for a brief stint, and during that time, Jeffrey would meet Anthony Sears. It was March 25th, 1989, and Jeffrey was at a bar when he met the young man.
And then would you state your name, spelling your last name, please?
Jeffrey Connor, Connor.
Mr. Connor, you were a friend of Anthony Sears, correct?
Yes.
How long had you known him before he was killed?
Approximately 3 years.
You were friends?
Yes.
In fact, you were with Anthony Sears on the night he went home with Mr. Dahmer, weren't you?
Yes.
Let me draw your attention to Saturday night, March 25th, 1989. Did there come a time when you met with Mr. Sears that evening?
Yes, I did.
About when was that?
It was probably around 10 or 10:30 at his apartment.
Okay. Did you then go someplace together?
Yes, we had gone out.
Where'd you go out to?
We went to Lacage.
Lacage. What is Lacage?
Lacage is a gay bar in Milwaukee.
Where's it located?
On 2nd National.
And how did you get there?
We took my car.
On that evening, did you come in contact with a person now known to you as Jeffrey Dahmer?
Yes, I did. I met him just prior to closing, which would be about 2 o'clock, 2:15.
When the bar closed, what happened?
We had gone outside.
Who's we?
Tony, Jeffrey Dahmer, myself, and another friend of mine.
Who's that friend?
Bob Keel.
Okay. And what did you do?
We had then gone to my car. Everybody had gotten in. Jeffrey Dahmer and Tony were in the back seat.
And then where did you go?
Then we left that area to drop off Tony and Mr. Dahmer.
Did somebody tell you that they were going home together?
I just kind of took that.
Okay. Where were they going to go? Were they going to go to Tony's place or Mr. Dahmer's place?
Mr. Dahmer's place.
Okay. And did Mr. Dahmer tell you how to get there?
Yes, he did.
When you pulled over, did you have any discussion at that point?
No.
Okay. Did you talk to Mr. Sears at all, make plans with him about his being picked up?
Yes, I did.
What was that about?
I had just reminded him that that Sunday was Easter and that I had plans to be with my family, and that in order for me to give him a ride home, I'd have to pick him up before I did that, which would be early morning sometime, and to call me.
And did he agree to do that?
Yes, he did.
Did Anthony Sears ever call you that evening?
No, he did not.
Early the next morning?
No.
Did you ever see Anthony Sears again?
No, I did not.
He stated he met this individual that he identified as Anthony Sears through the photo, and he got one of Mr. Sears' friends to drive him and Mr. Sears in the friend's auto to his grandmother's house. He related that when they got there, they engaged in sex. He gave him the drink that put him to sleep and subsequently killed him and dismembered the body. He indicated that this was the first one where he had kept anything of the individuals. He stated that he kept the victim's skull, which he boiled to remove all the skin, and he kept the scalp with the small ponytail because he liked it. He stated he kept the genitals of this person. He stated that at the time of his arrest, these items were in the black metal cabinet.
These remains that Jeffrey decided to hold on to were almost discovered by his father, Lionel.
About a 1 foot square box, metal and wood box, that I thought contained pornographic material.
And you asked Jeff to open it?
Yeah, because my mother, I didn't want her to come into contact with any of that stuff. And asked him to open it up, and he refused. He said, "I'd rather not." And I said, "Jeff, open it up. I just want to see what's in there." And he said, "Can't I have any privacy in the house at all? Just this 1 square foot of privacy." And I said, "Jeff, open it up, or I'm going to just take it down into the basement and get a screwdriver or something and open it up." And I just open it up. And he got angry, very visibly agitated, and said, "If I can't have 1 square foot of privacy, then I'm just going to leave." So he walked out of the house, and then I took the box. I took it from him. I mean, he gave it up. He walked out of the house. I'm surprised that he gave it up. But I started walking down the basement, and then he came in the back door just as I was going down the basement steps, and he said, "I'm sorry, Dad. I lost my temper. It's just some pornographic stuff in there." He said, "Just wait. I'll open it up tomorrow morning and show you what it is. Just let me put it away now and forget about it. Let's not cause an uproar anymore today or tonight, and because of Grandma." And so, my not fathoming what could be in that box, I said, "Okay, we'll just open it up tomorrow then, and then let's get rid of it, whatever it is." And the next morning he came down from upstairs and showed me, and there was pornographic literature in there. And I said, "Okay, get rid of it now, and I don't want to, see any more of it around here." He said, "Okay, Dad." And that was the end of that incident, and I didn't realize what was in that box.
After this, Jeffrey would take the remains and place them in his locker at the chocolate factory. Eventually, Jeffrey would boil Anthony Sears' skull and paint it so he could display it in his apartment. He figured if he disguised it with paint, if someone saw it, they would think it was a prop. Around this time, Jeffrey would come up with this idea of a temple that would showcase the remains of his victims. On May 23, 1989, Dahmer would be sentenced to 1 year in the House of Corrections, 5 years probation, and he would have to register as a sex offender for the sexual assault he committed on the 13-year-old boy. With this sentencing, he was able to participate in a work release program, and he was paroled before his year was up. This work release program allowed him to stay out of jail and remain a member of society. In early 1990, Jeffrey would move into the Oxford Apartments located on 924 North 25th Street, apartment 213. On May 29, 1990, Raymond Smith, who is sometimes referred to as Ricky Beeks, would be offered money by Dahmer to pose for pictures. Smith would agree, and once they were back at Jeffrey's apartment, the pair would watch porn for a short time, and then Jeffrey would drug and strangle him. Dahmer would then proceed to have sex with the dead body before he began his ritual of dismembering and disposing of the remains. Raymond Smith was the first victim that Jeffrey would take pictures of post-mortem. A short time before the murder of Raymond Smith, Jeffrey intended on killing someone else, but he had accidentally given his intended victim the wrong beverage, and Dahmer in turn drugged himself.
He brought another man back to the apartment and made him a drink, as he usually did in a coffee cup. The man drank the wrong cup, and consequently, Jeffrey drank the drink with the sleeping pills. He fell asleep, and the man robbed him of $300. Jeffrey did not report this incident to the police. He reported he would have strangled this victim, but the man had taken the cup without the sleeping pills.
A few weeks later, Jeffrey would meet Edward Smith. And per research done for this case, it does not appear that Raymond and Edward were related. After killing Edward, Jeffrey would go out and buy a 5-square-foot floor freezer to store his bones in. He would then soak the remaining flesh and muscles in acid, and then once they were deteriorated enough, he would flush the mixture down the toilet. Around this time, neighbors would begin complaining about a smell wafting from Dahmer's apartment.
Yes, after the complaint about the smell, and somebody actually identified his apartment as the source of the smell. So I had called and talked to him in the office and went with him to his apartment.
And what excuse did he give at that time?
He said his deep freezer broke and he had meat in it that's getting spoiled. I thought he was a nice guy at the time. He kept promising to get rid of the smell, but I told him that was the last time I can tolerate it.
Okay.
And so I had to contact my office to put that in writing to him.
So, in any event, at that point in time, did you have a mindset that he was going to be evicted no matter what because of the odor?
That's what I had in mind.
On September 2nd, 1990, Jeffrey would meet Ernest Miller. When Dahmer lured Ernest back to his apartment with the promise of $50, he realized that he didn't have enough sleeping pills to render him unconscious for as long as he wanted, but he still tried. Just like he suspected, Ernest would start to regain consciousness earlier than previous victims, so Jeffrey would stab him in the jugular with a knife. He would later state that he didn't want to cause Ernest any pain, so that's why he killed him this way. After he dismembered his body and defleshed his head, Jeffrey would paint the skull with granite spray paint. He would also keep his heart and some flesh to consume. After tenderizing Miller's remains, Jeffrey is said to have gotten a sexual thrill, especially after eating pieces of him. He would state that Ernest was now a part of him.
That was another step. It made me feel like they were a permanent part of me. Besides the just mere curiosity of what it would be like, it made them feel that they were a part of me, and it gave me a sexual satisfaction to do that.
On September 24th, 1990, Dahmer would meet David Thomas while walking around the local mall. He would offer to pay him if David would come home with him, to which he agreed. According to Jeffrey, he would drug him, but then decided not to rape him. Fearing that David would wake up and confront Jeffrey about drugging him, or worse, call the police, Dahmer would strangle him and dismember the body. 5 months would go by before Dahmer would kill again. It wasn't for a lack of trying. The chances just never presented itself like it had with his previous victims. Then, on March 7, 1991, Jeffrey would meet Curtis Strader at a bus station. As per usual, Jeffrey would offer Curtis $50 to come back to pose for nude photos at his apartment. Curtis agreed and went back to room 213 with Jeffrey. After drugging Curtis, Dahmer would rape him while he was unconscious, and then he would strangle him to death with a leather belt. In the case of Curtis Strader, Jeffrey would keep his skull, hands, and genitals. He would dispose of the rest of his body. Then, on April 7, 1991, Earl Lindsay was walking down the street after getting a key made from a local store. Somehow, Jeffrey was able to lure Earl back to his apartment. This is where Dahmer would drug him, but this time, Jeffrey wanted to try something different. Dahmer had longed for non-communicative company for as long as he could remember, and Errol Lindsay would be his first attempt at making a human zombie. After sedating the young man, Jeffrey would drill holes into his skull. He then poured acid into the openings he made with a baster. Jeffrey hoped that this would melt Errol's brain and basically lobotomize him. According to Dahmer, his experiment did not work. Errol Lindsay would wake up and say that he had a headache and ask what time it was. The fact that he was up and talking proved to Jeffrey that he had failed at what he was attempting to do. He would drug Errol for a second time and then strangle him. Jeffrey would then proceed to dismember Errol's body and put his remains in acid as a method of disposing of them.
Dahmer wanted here was the compliant sex partner, the zombie as he described it, rather than to have a corpse. It was his intention to keep this man alive if that was going to work, but when he concluded that he had failed to achieve the compliant partner with no will, only then did he strangle him. So what's another way to look at it is that when he couldn't have the zombie-like creation he was hoping for, he was willing to settle for a corpse. I asked him in that discussion the question, you didn't expect him to wake up and say, yes, master. And he said, no, but that was the general idea. Later in that same conversation, he said, quote, I was just trying to disable the will. And I asked, and subject them to your will? And he said, right.
On May 24, 1991, Dahmer would kill a man that he knew. 31-year-old Anthony Hughes was an acquaintance of Jeffrey Dahmer's. The pair had known each other for a few weeks, and some reports would state that Jeffrey claimed that they had started dating a few days prior to this murder. Anthony was deaf and mute. Since Jeffrey did not know sign language, the pair would communicate through handwritten notes. For some reason, despite the fact that this was an alleged budding relationship, Jeffrey became paranoid at the thought of losing Anthony. So on this particular day in May, Dahmer would lure Anthony to his apartment and drug him. He would drill a hole in his head and inject acid into his brain. Anthony Hughes would never regain consciousness. After some time, Jeffrey would strangle Anthony to death. Anthony would remain naked on the floor of Jeffrey Dahmer's bedroom for 3 days. Dahmer's next victim would be 14-year-old Conorak Synthesymphome. 3 days after murdering Anthony Hughes, Jeffrey would meet the young boy at a mall and ask him to come back to his apartment to pose for nude photos. Dahmer's typical tactic. Conorak, a native of Laos, would agree after contemplating the offer for some time. Perhaps he did not truly understand what Dahmer was asking of him, because according to sources, the boy spoke broken English. He probably thought that this was just an innocent offer. Once Dahmer got Conorak back to his apartment, he would take a few photos of him in his underwear. Then he would drug him. Once Conorak had passed out, Dahmer would perform oral sex on his unconscious body, and then he would drill a hole into his skull and pour acid onto the boy's brain. Dahmer would then lead Conorak back to his bedroom when he regained consciousness, and in there was the body of Anthony Hughes. According to Dahmer, Conorak had no reaction to seeing a dead body, but this is likely due to the fact that the young boy was heavily drugged and had acid destroying his brain. Jeffrey would lay next to Conorak and drink beer. At some point, Dahmer would leave the apartment to go to a local bar to continue drinking, leaving young Conorak alone. The young boy must have regained consciousness, and in his confusion he left the apartment. What he didn't realize is that he was naked walking around outside. A few people would see the young boy walking around disoriented, and they would call the police.
Okay, hi, I'm on 25th and State, and this is young man, he is butt naked, he has been beaten up, he is very bruised up, he can't stand, he's study fall out, he is butt naked, he has no clothes on, he was really hurt, and I ain't got no cord on him, I just seen him, and he needs some help.
Where is he at?
On 25th and State, the corner of 25th and State.
At around 2 a.m. and on the way back from the bar, Dahmer would see Conorak with a few women who were trying to figure out what happened to him. Dahmer would approach the women and state that this was his boyfriend and that they had gotten into a fight after they drank a little too much alcohol. These women were not buying the story. For one, they could see that Conorak was a child, not the man that Dahmer claimed that he was. And second, there was something very off about him. Yes, he was disoriented, but this seemed to be way more than just intoxication from alcohol. Konarak was unable to tell them what happened to him. He was speaking in his native language, and he didn't seem to understand what the women were asking him. Dahmer would attempt to grab him, but the women blocked him. Officers would respond to the 911 call that the women placed. Dahmer would reiterate the story that he told the women about how Konarak was his boyfriend. The police would accompany Konarak back to Dahmer's apartment, where Jeffrey would show them Polaroid pictures of them together, further proving to the officers that the pair had some sort of relationship. However, what officers didn't realize was that these pictures were taken only a few hours beforehand. With this, the officers would leave Konarak at Dahmer's apartment. If they had only investigated a few minutes more, or even looked in Dahmer's bedroom, they would have seen that something was wrong. It is actually amazing that the two police officers didn't notice the repugnant smell emitting from Dahmer's apartment. At this point, so much death had occurred there, and a body was only a few feet from them. But miraculously for Dahmer, they didn't notice, or they just wanted to get out of there. When the officers left, Jeffrey would inject more acid into the hole that he drilled in Konarak's skull, killing him. After the officers had left, one of the women would follow up with the police inquiring as to what happened to the young boy.
Educated boyfriend of another boyfriend.
Well, how old was this child?
It wasn't a child, it was an adult.
It would later be discovered that Konarak's older brother was the young boy that Jeffrey Dahmer had molested back in 1988. It appears as though this was merely a coincidence that Dahmer had attacked two members of the synthesin foam family. The next day, after dealing with the police, Dahmer would call out of work to dismember the bodies of Anthony Hughes and Konarak synthesin foam. On June 30th, 1991, Jeffrey would travel to Chicago to attend the city's Gay Pride Parade. When Dahmer was on his way home, he would cross paths with a young man named Matt Turner. He had asked Matt if he would like to go back to his apartment to partake in a professional photo shoot. Excitedly, Matt accepted the offer. When they arrived at the Oxford Apartments, Dahmer would put on The Exorcist 3, and then carry out his standard mode of attack. He would drug Matt and then strangle him. After he killed him, he would dismember his body. He placed his head in the freezer, and he would throw some remains in the trash. Dahmer would keep a few of Matt Turner's organs to cannibalize. Jeff's frequency in killing had increased. It seemed as though he was unstoppable, and his compulsion to lure, drug, and kill showed no signs of slowing down. About a week after Jeffrey killed Matt Turner, he would meet Jeremiah Weinberger. The pair would meet at a gay bar in Chicago, and Jeffrey would ask if Jeremiah would like to spend the weekend with him in Milwaukee. Jeremiah agreed, and the pair headed back to Dahmer's apartment. According to reports, Jeremiah spent a few days with Dahmer, but when he decided it was time for him to return to Chicago, Jeffrey couldn't stomach the thought of being left alone. He would convince Jeremiah to stay with him for one more drink. This drink, as I'm sure you can guess, was laced with crushed pills. Once unconscious, Jeffrey would drill a hole into Jeremiah's skull, attempting once more to create a human zombie. Instead of acid, Jeffrey would inject boiling water into Jeremiah's brain. Jeremiah would jolt awake, but Dahmer would drug him back into unconsciousness. Jeremiah would fall into a coma, and 2 days later he would pass away. Jeffrey would place Jeremiah in the bathtub for a few days before he would dismember him. On July 15, 1991, Jeffrey would meet Oliver Lacey. Oliver was a bodybuilder who had a girlfriend and a 2-year-old son at the time of his murder. Jeffrey would lure Oliver back to his apartment with the promise of money in exchange for some photographs. Jeffrey would later state that the pair would engage in light sex, and afterwards Dahmer would drug him. Eventually, Dahmer would strangle Oliver Lacey. Due to constantly being on the hunt for other victims, Jeffrey called out of work frequently. So much so that on the same day he met Oliver, Jeffrey was fired from the Ambrosia chocolate factory after he called in sick to deal with Lacey's body. Jeffrey would keep Oliver's entire skeleton in a large freezer he had in his apartment, as well as his heart. On July 16, 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer would kill his last victim. As per his normal luring ritual, Dahmer would offer 25-year-old Joseph Bredehoff money to come back to his apartment in exchange for nude photos. When the pair returned to Jeffrey's apartment, Dahmer would perform oral sex on Joseph and then drug him with sleeping pills mixed in his drink. Once unconscious, Jeffrey would strangle him with a leather strap, and then, once he was deceased, he would decapitate Joseph and place his head in the freezer. He would then put the rest of his body in a barrel of acid. On July 22, 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer would meet Tracy Edwards, the man who would escape Dahmer's apartment after being lured there and subsequently lead to Jeffrey Dahmer's arrest.
You solemnly swear all testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Please be seated. Then, sir, would you tell us your name and spell your last name for us?
Tracy Edwards, Edwards.
Mr. Edwards, you're going to ask you to speak up very loudly into the microphone. I would like to know in what state do you reside at the present time?
Louisiana.
And how old are you, sir?
32.
32, and you are single?
Yes.
You were in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on July the 22nd, 1991?
Yes.
And at or about that time, on that late afternoon, did you have occasion to see a person that you knew at that time or subsequently learned was a fellow by the name of Jeffrey Dahmer?
Yes.
So you were with a couple of your buddies, were you?
That's correct.
And what were you doing?
We was drinking beer, just talking, hanging out, you know.
About 6 o'clock at night, was this?
Yeah, about 6:15.
Did you have occasion then to see Mr. Dahmer?
Yeah, he approached us eventually and started talking to us. Yeah,
Were you 3 black males?
one white, 2 black males.
So you're friends?
Yeah, my best friend was white. Yeah.
When he came up and started talking to you, what is it that Mr. Dahmer said to you?
He said he was just in the city from Chicago. He was taking care of her sick grandmother, I believe, in West Allis.
Did he have any further conversation with you and your friends?
Yeah, he was just talking. He said he was a professional photographer. He usually pays people for pictures and stuff like that if anybody was interested in making money at that time.
To have to pose for pictures?
Yeah.
Did he describe the kind of pictures that you were going to be posing for if you chose to take him up on the offer?
He said nude.
Nude. Right. You went up to the apartment. Tell us what happens when you get up to the apartment. Tell us what you observed, what your senses told you.
Okay. First of all, it seemed like a normal apartment. When we got inside, he turned off burglar alarms. I asked him why. First, it was a foul odor, okay?
Tell us about that. What kind of an odor?
It was just like an odor. I didn't quite know what it was. You know, he told me a sewer pipe had broke and management would take care of it.
Now, you're fully clothed.
Yes.
Okay. And you're sitting on a couch.
Right.
And he talks to you about this posing, and you weren't sure you're going to do it.
Right.
How much had you been offered to do the posing?
$100.
Okay. And when he brings you the beer, he brings you rum and Coke?
Yeah, he brings the beer first, and then he brings the rum and Coke.
Okay, when you start talking about the fish in the fish tank, do you bring that up or does he?
He does.
And what do you do when he does that?
I turn to the right, like the fish tank is here. I'm turning all the way over here.
You turn to your right to look at it?
To look at the fish tank, right.
And when that happens, what happens to you?
All of a sudden, a handcuff and a knife is pulled on me.
Handcuff is placed on your body? Where?
On my left wrist.
And you see a knife?
Yeah, a knife, yeah.
Now, at that moment, what do you do?
First, I feel fear. Then I ask him what's going on. You know, this is not necessary, to pull a knife on me.
Are you afraid?
Yes.
Do you have any reason to know why he did that?
None whatsoever.
Did you have any idea at that time it was going to happen?
No.
Did that room have a TV set in it?
Yes.
Was there anything going on the TV?
Yeah, the Exorcist movies was playing at that time.
There was an Exorcist movie on. You know which one of them?
The name I'm not sure. I think it's 3. I'm not sure which one.
So there was a movie. Did you know it to be part of television or VCR?
VCR. Normally that's not on regular television, so I thought it was VCR.
You knew there was a movie showing.
Right.
Did you see him put it on, or was it on?
No. When we first got into the apartment, he went through the back to the back bedroom. Maybe he put it on then. I'm not sure.
Okay. And then what happened? You're both sitting on the bed?
Yes.
Are you still in handcuffs?
Yes.
Is he holding the handcuff?
Right.
You still have the knife?
Right.
Is it pointed at your side, as you've told us before?
Right.
You trying to be cool?
Very much so.
You're not fighting with him?
No,
What's your intention? What are you planning on doing?
Getting away, I was contemplating on at the point jumping out the window. I was basically talking with this person, trying to let him know I was his friend.
As you were sitting there on the bed, when he had you by the handcuff and a knife at your side, at that time, which would have been maybe 7 o'clock?
Something like that.
What impression was made upon your mind by the conduct, action, manner, expression, and conversation that you observed of Mr. Dahmer?
His frame of mind is what you want to know. Okay, he acted. At times he would go through like different changes with me, you know.
Tell us about that.
1 minute he's like nice. Then he was telling he didn't want people to leave him or abandon him, things of this nature. You know? Yeah.
Well, what did you think about him as a person? What impression was made on your mind of this fella that you're dealing with here?
That at times he wasn't himself, and then at times he was like a nice guy. You know, he would come and go different times. You know, throughout the whole time. Then he would like sit, being quiet at times, watching the movie, wanting me to watch the movie. You know, and just doing little chanting sounds. You know.
Did you observe him watching the movie and how he would react to the movie?
Right, he would like just start rocking back and forth, you know, certain parts of the movie or whatever.
You have to say, what did he say, Madam?
He was like chanting in certain times and rocking back and forth. Right?
Tell us about his chanting. What was that all about?
I'm not even sure, sir, but it was just like, I can't tell you the words. I couldn't understand what he was saying at that time.
Can you mimic him? How it sounded?
It's like a slow slur, like some of that nature, some close like that, I'm not sure.
Did it keep on for a period of time?
Off and on throughout the ordeal.
And how about the movement back and forth? How was that being effectuated?
Just like back and forth, he would do it every now and then.
Just as you are rocking in your chair?
Like this.
And chanting?
And chanting.
Was there any parts of the movie that was going on that you saw that he said anything about?
It was like the part about the preacher that used to be a preacher that had got possessed, and that it would seem like he was like interested in that part. That part had his attention more than anything.
But tell us about what you mean by that. What impressions were made upon your mind when this was going on as to had his attention? How did he appear to you?
It appeared like it was like he wanted to mimic it or be like that part, you know, being demonized or whatever in that nature.
I'm sorry, I missed you.
Yeah, like he wanted that type of movie, that part, certain parts of that part interested him. You know, it was like he changed with it at times. Then he would get more aggressive, try to get me to handcuff myself, both hands. He told me it made him feel more dominant.
Okay, did you and he move off of the bed at any time?
He told me to lay down, face down, put both of my hands behind my back because he changed again at that point, like he got more aggressive at that time.
Okay, now, but tell us, did he still have the knife out?
Yes, he still had the knife.
And what did you do?
Okay, I kind of like laid on my sides for some reason. I guess God told me not to lay flat down or let this person handcuff me, so I didn't.
So you were trying to stop that from happening, but you got down on the floor.
Right.
What did he do?
He kind of laid across me, put his head across my chest at that point.
What was he doing with his head?
Pardon me?
What did it appear to you he was doing with his head? What was he trying to do?
Like he was listening to my heart, because at the point he told me he was going to eat my heart at that point.
He said he was going to eat your heart?
Yes, that's correct. So I suggested we sit on a couch. I had unbuttoned my shirt to try to make him feel more at ease. And then I just sat on the couch and he just started going out of himself again.
Going out of himself?
Yeah, he was like paying me no attention at that time.
Like he wasn't there?
He started the chanting again, and it's like just sitting there, you know. And then I just, for some reason, I said, well, I need to go to the bathroom again, and he didn't follow me at that point. So I reached up, I got up, and then I hit him, and I ran out.
You hit him?
Right.
Did you have any other belongings there?
Yeah, I have my bag right there at the end of the couch. I sit in exactly the same place as I sit when I went in there.
So when you got up, he let go of your cuff to let you go to the bathroom again?
He didn't even, he just like, just let me stay there. I was going to go for the window. At that point, he didn't even have the cuff. It's like I wasn't even there anymore.
And when you saw that, what'd you do?
I just seized the opportunity. I said, well, at least I'm going to die trying. I'm not just going to sit here.
What'd you do, son?
I hit him, and I ran towards the door, and he was right there, tried to grab me, get me back in there.
And what happened?
Then I made it outside.
So he wasn't able to bring you back in?
Bring me back in there, no.
He tried?
He tried.
And as you left that apartment, as you got away from him, I'm going to ask you again, what impressions were made on your mind by the conduct of Jeffrey Dahmer, by the actions of Jeffrey Dahmer, by the manner, expressions, and conversations of Jeffrey Dahmer that you observed? Can you give us some words?
It's like I told the policeman that this freak, this crazy guy, was trying to hurt me.
Did you run out of the building?
Yes, I did.
Did you summon help?
Yes.
Milwaukee Police Department?
That's correct.
Did they come back there with you to the apartment?
Right.
Did you eventually go back into the apartment with the Milwaukee police officers?
Yes.
And then he was arrested.
Right.
After Jeffrey had been arrested, he was interrogated by Detective Patrick Kennedy. According to the detective, it would take some time for Jeffrey to open up about the crimes that he had committed. Then eventually, Dahmer would state, "When I tell you what I did, it's going to make you famous." To some, this may seem like Jeffrey is boasting about what his inevitable notoriety was going to be. But perhaps Jeffrey knew he was just a special kind of monster, one in which the world had never seen. He knew the detailed confession he was about to give. It was going to be extremely unique to the world and horrifying. During his initial interrogation, Jeffrey would confess to all of the murders he committed starting back in 1978 with Stephen Hicks.
He would make offers to lure young men by offering them money.
Sometimes, yes.
And what you'd offer them money for is for the taking of pictures.
Okay.
You'd also offer them drinks.
Mm-hmm.
Your answer is yes?
Right.
And you didn't necessarily propose a sexual encounter, but you hoped that it would lead in that direction.
Right.
The other procedure that you utilized was to drill holes through the bone, through the skull ligaments.
Yes.
What did you inject into the hole?
Sometimes hot water, sometimes a weak acid solution.
What sort of acid?
Hydrochloric.
Now, what was the purpose of that drilling technique now?
To put the person in a sort of zombie-like state. I didn't know exactly what it would do, but I was experimenting.
What do you mean when you say a zombie-like state? What do you
state where he would be willing to just follow my orders and not want to leave.
Over the course of the next few months, Jeffrey Dahmer would be charged with 15 counts of murder in Wisconsin. He was not charged with attempted murder of Tracy Edwards, and he was not charged with the murder of Stephen Toomey. Toomey's remains were never recovered, and the state chose to only convict Dahmer in murders that they could be proven beyond any reasonable doubt that he actually did do it. Despite the fact that he confessed to disposing of this body, he would still claim that he had no actual memory of murdering him. Dahmer would plead guilty to all 15 murders he was charged with in Wisconsin, but his sanity would be brought up in trial.
The paraphilia is basically defined, it's looked at as a problem, as a mental disorder within the DSM-3R because of the object that is for which the affection or the attraction lies. Is that correct?
Not exactly. It's looked at as an abnormality in DSM-3R because people are experiencing something different in terms of their mental state than what's normal. And if you're having abnormal mental experiences, we psychiatrists say that's a mental disorder.
It's not abnormal to have recurrent sexual urges or to have recurrent sexually arousing fantasies, is it?
It's sure abnormal to walk around all day having fantasies about having sex with corpses.
Doctor, you didn't answer my question.
What's the question?
The question was, it's not abnormal, is it, to have recurring intense sexual urges and recurring sexual fantasies? That in and of itself is not abnormal, is it?
Not necessarily.
Right. And for a person, the abnormality that relates why it qualifies a paraphilia is the object of those fantasies. And in this particular case, the object would be, depending whether you accept an unconscious person or a living compliant person or a dead person. In this case, you've made the necrophilia, started you down that path because there were dead bodies involved with some sex. Is that correct?
It is the content of the fantasies, not the object. I'm saying no, I don't agree with you saying the object. I'm saying the content of the fantasies, having that kind of mental content recurrently running through your head, and the content is associated with intense sexual arousal, is abnormal.
All right. Is the content being a dead body? That's what makes it...
The content being all we've talked about, okay? I don't want to repeat because you're asking me to be brief. But
all right, if a person simply has this recurrent thing about a dead body, would that qualify as a paraphilia? Recurrent sexual urges, recurrent sexually arousing fantasies, just about a dead body. Would that qualify?
That would qualify if they're having intense, recurrent, sexually arousing fantasies and urges about having sex with a dead body. The definition included, it wasn't even relevant to say it had to be at least 6 months. This has gone on here for years. If I'm walking around for more than 6 months having intense, recurrent, sexually arousing fantasies and urges about having sex with a dead body, I got a mental disorder.
All right, we got a person now, a human being, that is going around having recurrent, intense sexual desires with recurrent sexual fantasies about, he's a man, about an attractive woman that lives next door. That goes on for months and even a year. Is he mentally ill? Got a disorder?
I'm not trying to avoid it. I doubt it. But, you know, you're a hypothetical guy. I'm not examining as a doctor. I made the point earlier, we make value judgments. If this isn't hurting anybody else, if it's not causing suffering, if it's not causing distress, it isn't the business of psychiatry to get into the personal thoughts of people that don't cause any difficulty. So if he's thinking that, it isn't interfering with his life, it isn't hurting anyone, under those circumstances, no, that's not a disorder.
And he wouldn't be a mental disorder?
I'm agreeing with you to answer directly. Yes, I agree that would not be a mental disorder.
There are many people, are there not? Maybe it's someone that, maybe it's the woman next door, or a man with an attractive woman. Maybe she works in the backyard, dresses scantily, is a normal person. He watches her and sees her relatively frequently, has intense sexual desires, very intense, experiences erection maybe every time he sees her, fantasizes what he would like to do with her, thinks about it, maybe masturbates about it from time to time. And she's there through the years, and he's watching her through the years. And he wrestles with it. And she's a married lady, and he is not going to move on her. And he wrestles with those urges, and he doesn't move on her. He's not mentally disordered, is he, doctor?
I'm pausing because some men would move under that circumstance, but I wouldn't say they're mentally ill, no.
And there are people that have jobs together, people that are married. One is married to X, the other's married to Y. And they're thrown together by chance. And they have a keen sexual attraction to each other. They may never communicate it. They may work for years, and out of a sense of dignity and respect and for their marriage and their spouse, they may be powerfully attracted to that woman. Try to push out the fantasy, but they're working with her every day, and that fantasy comes back, and they're sexually aroused by it. And they may dream about it, and they struggle with it for years. And they don't even express the affection for the other person. They don't even communicate with their eyes. They control themselves, and they wrestle with it, and those fantasies come back, and those desires come back every day, and they struggle with it. There are such people, are there not, doctor?
Well, I might want to examine that person to see if he's ill. If I ask the average guy if he's walking around all day having to constantly fight off these repeated intense urges and fantasies, he's been doing it for months, I would wonder whether or not he was ill. I wouldn't say based on that he is, but it would be reasonable. He said he's suffering. We got into the ballpark that I said can make you a patient. It would be reasonable for me with this suffering person to wonder whether he ought to be a patient.
We'll strike the suffering. He's not suffering.
If you start taking enough of it away and make him a normal guy, I'll agree with he's a normal guy.
All right, what I'm saying is, and you know what I'm saying is, that there are people that have intense sexual urges, that have recurrent, intense, sexually arousing fantasies.
And I'm saying some of them may have a mental disorder.
About women if it's a man, about one man after another if it's a homosexual, if he's a homosexual, about a woman towards a man perhaps, and we expect those. We don't call them mentally disordered people, and yet their desires are very strong, their fantasies are very strong, and they're not considered mentally disordered for that, are they, Doctor?
Well, I think I've answered your question.
And the answer is that they are not considered mentally disordered.
Well, there were several answers because you phrased it several different ways, but I think I've responded.
Jeffrey Dahmer's trial would last a grand total of 2 weeks. On February 15, 1992, the jury came back with a verdict that during each of his crimes, Dahmer was a sane individual.
At the time the crime was committed in count 5 of the information in regard to the death of Edward W. Smith, did the defendant Jeffrey L. Dahmer have a mental disease? Answer, no.
And so it came back for each of the 15 counts. The jury ruling Jeffrey Dahmer was sane at the time he murdered and dismembered 15 young Milwaukee area males. Dahmer appeared emotionless as the verdicts were read. Family members of the victims expressed a feeling of justice served and that they can now begin to put their shattered lives back together.
I feel sorry for his parents. I hope that, they feel the pain that we feel because of what their son did. But now we have to get our lives back together and we have to start living.
After 3 weeks of often gruesome testimony detailing Dahmer's dismemberment of his victims and his fetishes with corpses and body parts, the jury decided that no matter how horrendous his crimes, Jeffrey Dahmer knew right from wrong and had the ability to conform his behavior to the law. That he was, as the prosecutor painted him, a cold-blooded killer who was yet legally sane.
A few months after his conviction in Wisconsin, Jeffrey would be extradited to Ohio to stand trial for the 1978 murder of Stephen Hicks. Jeffrey Dahmer would plead guilty to this crime and he would receive an additional life sentence. Dahmer would be imprisoned at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin. He would spend his first year in prison in solitary confinement. This was due to the fact that the officials were concerned about the other inmates' reaction to his presence, and it posed a safety concern for Jeffrey and the other inmates. In July of 1994, long after being placed in general population in prison, another inmate tried to kill Jeffrey. This inmate would fashion a weapon made out of a razor blade and a toothbrush. He attempted to slash Jeffrey's throat. The wounds Jeffrey received were far from life-threatening, and he would heal quickly. Throughout his time in prison, Jeffrey would keep in touch with his parents. It would become apparent to them that Jeffrey did not care about his life. He would state in a phone call with his mother that "It doesn't matter, Mom. I don't care if something happens to me." While in none of the research that has been conducted for this episode does it state that Jeffrey Dahmer tried to commit suicide in any way, he longed for death, and he said in his closing statement during his trial that he wished for it.
Your Honor, it is over now. This has never been a case of trying to get free. I didn't ever want freedom. Frankly, I wanted death for myself. This was a case to tell the world that I did what I did not for reasons of hate. I hated no one. I knew I was sick or evil or both. Now I believe I was sick. The doctors have told me about my sickness, and now I have some peace. I know how much harm I have caused. I tried to do the best I could after the arrest to make amends, but no matter what I did, I could not undo the terrible harm I have caused. My attempt to help identify the remains was the best that I could do, and that was hardly anything. I feel so bad for what I did to those poor families, and I understand their rightful hate. I know I will be in prison for the rest of my life. I know that I will have to turn to God to help me get through each day. I should have stayed with God. I tried and failed and created a holocaust. Thank God there will be no more harm that I can do. I believe that only the Lord Jesus Christ can save me from my sins. I have instructed Mr. Boyle to end this matter. I do not want to contest the civil case. I've told Mr. Boyle to try and finalize them if he can. If there is ever any money, I want it to go to the victims' families. I've talked to Mr. Boyle about other things that might help ease my conscience in some way of coming up with ideas on how to make some amends to these families, and I will work with him on that. I want to return to Ohio and quickly end that matter so that I can put all of this behind me and then come right back here to do my sentence. I decided to go through this trial for a number of reasons. One of the reasons was to let the world know that these were not hate crimes. I wanted the world in Milwaukee, which I deeply hurt, to know the truth of what I did. I didn't want unanswered questions. All the questions have now been answered. I wanted to find out just what it was that caused me to be so bad and evil. But most of all, Mr. Boyle and I decided that maybe there was a way for us to tell the world that if there are people out there with these disorders, maybe they can get some help before they end up being hurt or hurting someone. I think the trial did that. I take all the blame for what I did. I hurt many people. The judge in my earlier case tried to help me, and I refused his help, and he got hurt by what I did. I hurt those policemen in the Conorak matter, and I shall ever regret causing them to lose their jobs, and I hope and pray that they can get their jobs back because I know they did their best, and I just plain fooled them. For that, I am so sorry. I know I hurt my probation officer, who was really trying to help me. I am so sorry for that, and sorry for everyone else that I have hurt. I have hurt my mother and father and stepmother. I love them all so very much. I hope that they will find the same peace I am looking for. Mr. Boyle's associates, Wendy and Ellen, have been wonderful to me, helping me through this worst of all times. I want to publicly thank Mr. Boyle. He didn't need to take this case, but when I asked him to help me find the answers and to help others, if I could, he stayed with me and went way overboard in trying to help me. Mr. Boyle and I agreed that it was never a matter of trying to get off. It was only a matter of which place I would be housed the rest of my life, not for my comfort, but for trying to study me in the hopes of helping me and learning to help others who might have problems. I know I will be in prison. I pledge to talk to doctors who might be able to find some answers. In closing, I just want to say that I hope God has forgiven me. I know society will never be able to forgive me. I know the families of the victims will never be able to forgive me for what I have done. I promise I will pray each day to ask for their forgiveness when the hurt goes away, if ever. I have seen their tears, and if I could give my life right now to bring their loved ones back, I would do it. I am so very sorry. Your Honor, I know that you are about to sentence me. I ask for no consideration. I want you to know that I have been treated perfectly by the deputies who have been in your court and the deputies who work the jail. The deputies have treated me very professionally, and I want everyone to know that. They have not given me special treatment. Here is a trustworthy saying that deserves full acceptance. Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of who I am the worst. But for that very reason I was shown mercy, so that in me, the worst of sinners, Christ Jesus might display his unlimited patience as an example for those who would believe in him and receive eternal life. Now to the King eternal, immortal, invisible, the only God, be honor and glory forever and ever. I know my time in prison will be terrible, but I deserve whatever I get because of what I have done. Thank you, Your Honor, and I am prepared for your sentence, which I know will be the maximum. I ask for no consideration.
Count 15, life imprisonment with parole eligibility to be 70 years after the inception of that sentence to be consecutive to count 14.
On the morning of November 28, 1994, Jeffrey Dahmer would get his wish. Dahmer, along with 2 other inmates, would begin their work detail in the prison gym. According to reports, the 3 inmates were left unsupervised for about 20 minutes. When the officer returned, he found Dahmer on the floor of the gym bathroom, and he had been severely injured. It appeared that Dahmer had been beat on the head and face with a metal bar of some sort. Clinging to life, Jeffrey was rushed to the hospital. and was soon pronounced dead. Christopher Scarver, the inmate who murdered Jeffrey, would state that in no way did Dahmer attempt to stop him or fight back. While examining Jeffrey's body, this appeared to hold true. Dahmer had no defensive wounds whatsoever. Scarver would also attack and kill the other inmate that was with them during their work detail. The other inmate, Jesse Anderson, had murdered his wife, and he too was bludgeoned to death by Scarver. When asked by reporters why he killed Dahmer, he would reply with a song lyric.
Y'all know everybody plays the fool this time. Did you kill Dahmer? No exception to the rule.
Christopher Scarver was already serving a life sentence for murder in 1990. He would receive 2 additional life sentences for the murder of Jeffrey Dahmer and Jesse Anderson. Throughout the years, Scarver would state that he killed Dahmer for a multitude of reasons. According to him, Jeffrey would make unsettling jokes and would form his food into the shape of limbs and simulate his ketchup as blood, something that didn't sit well with Scarver or the other inmates. He also didn't like the special treatment that Dahmer would allegedly get. According to Scarver, Jeffrey would always have a guard walking with him to protect him from other inmates. Scarver would also state that he killed Jeffrey as a form of revenge due to the fact that Jeffrey killed many African American men throughout the duration of his crimes, and he believed that there was a racial motivation behind Dahmer's attacks, something that Jeffrey refuted many times.
My only objective was to find the best-looking guy that I could. I went to bathhouses, I went to bars, shopping malls. Their sexual preference didn't matter to me.
Did their race matter to you?
No, their race didn't matter to me. The first 2 young men were white. The 3rd young man was American Indian. The 4th and 5th were Hispanic. So no, race had nothing to do with it. It was just their looks.
Jeffrey Dahmer had a will that would state that he didn't want any type of service in the event of his death. All he wanted was to be cremated. Those wishes were granted, and his ashes were equally divided between both Lionel and Joyce. Over the years, Lionel Dahmer would grant a handful of interviews to speak about his son in the hopes that him and his wife Sherry could assist parents or loved ones with seeing warning signs in their children. Jeffrey's mother would pass away due to cancer in 2000, and Jeffrey's brother David would change his surname so he could live out his life without the constant reminder of what his brother did. Jeffrey Dahmer's case is one of the most notorious among the true crime community. People will point out the uniqueness of his case because he seemed to hate what he did, and yet he continued to do it because of this insatiable compulsion that he had. Some believe that the gloomy, remorseful man who had his eyes casted down throughout his entire trial, staring at his fingertips and nervously rubbing them together, was a man filled with regret, and he felt empathy. Some believe that this was all an act that Jeffrey Dahmer performed in front of the entire world to garner sympathy because he was a master manipulator. Despite what you feel or what side of the argument you fall on, remember this. Jeffrey Dahmer committed 17 murders, countless assaults, and other unspeakable acts against humanity. If he was still out there, alive and on the streets, he would still be killing.
It never completely goes away. I'll probably have to live with it for the rest of my life. I wish it would go away. I wish there was some way to completely get rid of the compulsive thoughts, the feelings. It's not nearly so bad now that there's no avenues to actually act on it. But no, it never seems to go completely away.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Apex and the Abyss. If you would like to reach out, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can also submit episode requests to apexandabyss@gmail.com. If you would like to support the show, you can do that in many ways. You can give the show a 5-star rating and a review on iTunes. You can head on over to Patreon to become a monthly donor for as little as $1 a month. You can buy show merchandise on tpublic.com, or you can submit a one-time donation at apexandabyss.com. All the links will be posted in the show notes. Have a great week, everyone. Until next time.
Perhaps it can best be said in St. John chapter 15, verse 13. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Edward Warren Smith tried to be Jeffrey Dahmer's friend. As a result, he lost his life. Mr. Dahmer, Eddie's gone now, the victim of your senseless killing. Where do we go from here? We ask ourselves. Why did this happen to a person like Eddie? He gave so much and asked so little. All he wanted was a chance to be himself. A chance to be happy. When all the facts are known, we hope that society will have gained some knowledge that will help prevent a tragedy such as the one Eddie suffered.
Despite the fact that you had the knives, the saws, the bats, the acid, the drills, and possibly a gun, even while he was in a semi-conscious state of mind, you didn't give him the chance to fight for his life. You took his life like a thief in the night by cutting his throat. Rather than facing him and let him fight for the thing that he felt most dear, you took the coward way out. Did you ever stop to think that this was someone's son? Did you ever stop to think that this is someone's brother, nephew, uncle, cousin, grandson, or just someone's friend?
My name is Shirley Hughes, and I'm Tony Anthony Hughes' mother. First of all, thank God, and to give thanks to the judge and to Mr. McCann for the verdict that came in. I would like to say to Jeffrey Dahmer that he don't know the pain, the hurt, the loss, and the mental state that he had put our family in.
You took my 17-year-old son away from me. I'll never get a chance to tell him that I loved him. I'd have a chance to tell him that I loved him the last time I saw him, which will be a year tomorrow. You took my daughter's only brother away from her. She'll never have a chance to sing and dance with him again. You took my mother's oldest grandchild from her, and for that I can never forgive you.
You killed my brother, Richard Guerrero. You also killed my father and my mother's youngest future. And my 3 brothers' lives, including my life, my husband, and my 3 children, will never forget this tragedy that you inflicted upon us. Therefore, I would like to end my speech by saying in my language that Jeffrey, you are el diablo, el puro diablo que estaba suelto en las calles de nosotros. That means the devil, the pure devil that walked our streets and was loose. So, Your Honor, please, I beg you, don't let this man ever walk our streets or see daylight again.
This man should never be able to walk the face of the earth or to be able to harm anyone else again. I want a few more things I want to say in my heart. I want to thank the jury for seeing this man for what he is. A sneaky, conniving person that if he had a chance, he'd constantly do this again. So I thank the jury for seeing this man for what he is. I want to thank E. Michael McCann, district attorney, for being there with the family, seeing the family suffer this way, and to realize that we all have feelings.